Hello and welcome to the World Parks Academy webinar series. My name is Hannah and I'm hosting today from Bloomington, Indiana. If you could let me know that you can hear us. We have people on the line. Looks like Stephanie and Kay Brown. You can hear us. Just say so in the chat box by typing yes. Okay. Yes from Stephanie. Matthew. And if you could also take a moment and click next to where you see where your picture would be in your name box, and you click on rename, and you can type in where you're coming from and what organization you're with, and provide us some information. I'll go ahead and do that now. Here from the Epley Institute at Indiana University. I'm not sure if Kay Brown can hear us. Yes, okay. So we can go ahead and get started. Today we have Caroline Gutleben from France, and she's the director of Plant and City, which is the French National Center for Research on Green Spaces and Urban Landscaping. I can turn it over to you, Caroline. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, I'm very pleased to be here with you today. I would like to start this webinar with a short presentation of Plant and City. This is as Hannah stated previously, the French Technical Center for, I'm sorry. Oh yeah, okay, yes. The French Technical Center for Research and Experiments on Green Space and Nature in City. Our main goal are to carry out studies and experiments on nature in city and green space, and to share the knowledge and the results of research with professionals. We are very invested in the construction of partnership with green space stakeholders. And in France, the context of the creation of Plant and City in 2005, the one that you may know in your country as well, was the social expectations and needs for nature and city, environmental issues, and for green space, for which green space can play a role, technical issues and economic issues like how to do better with decreasing means, for example. So before the creation of Plant and City, there was no middleman between city councils, landscaping companies, and research institutions. And I won't explain you today how important the connection are between these two worlds. So we did the middleman between all these stakeholders. Soon after the creation of Plant and City, we received the support of the French Organization of Mayors, which was very important for us. So our members, we are set up as a non-profit organization, and we have now more than 500 members from local governments. Most of the biggest cities of France are members of Plant and City. Members of our landscape companies, landscapers, and other structures involved in the maintenance of green space, professional federation, research institution, etc. And in 2013, we have the opportunity to create a counterpart in Switzerland. So there is now Plant and City Switzerland with about 30 members, and we work closely together. So each year we carry out about 30 studies and experiments on different themes like agronomy and urban soil, biocontrol solution for pest and weed management, plant innovation and diversification, economy and green space management, urban ecology and biodiversity, landscaping, landscape planning, and urbanism. So where we are, our offices are in Angers, in the heart of the international competitiveness cluster of the vegetal. Here is a picture of Angers in summer, so you can see that it's a nice place to live. On this map, Angers is this little red point close to the Atlantic coast of France. So the team of Plantain City is of 15 people, mainly with agronomy, landscape planning, ecology, and horticultural skills. And if you are interested in having more information on our activities or on our studies, you can find it on our website. Some pages are translated in English. And to finish this short introduction, some words about your speaker. I have a 5-year degree from the French Institute of Landscape and Horticulture. I did an internship in New Zealand and a semester at McGill University in Canada. And after some experience on plant protection and integrated pest management on urban issues, I worked at the creation of Plantain City, and I took the responsibility of the financial and the scientific direction. And I'm very pleased to be here with you today. So now it's time to start the topic of the webinar, green heritage amenities and their contribution to society. So first of all, I want to precise that this presentation is part of the vision of Plantain City of what is important to say regarding to the roles of green space at different levels, first for people, for the environment, of course, and for the economy. So we need to keep in mind that this topic is closely related to the change in the relationship between human and nature. So what are the learning objectives for the next 45 minutes? I want you to become more knowledgeable of the current research on parks and green space amenities, but 45 minutes is not enough to present all the research that has increased on this subject over the last few years. So I would give you a selection of key scientific facts providing evidence of the benefits of urban green space. And to finish, I want you to have a broader understanding of the most relevant arguments in favor of parks and green space. So if you have any question, you can leave them on the interface at the end of the webinar, and I will answer to your question the best that I can. Now, let me give you a little background. As I previously stated, the research about green space has strongly increased over the last few years. For example, on this graph, you can see that from 2009 to 2015, the scientific publication doubled. And the research subjects are very broad: environmental assessment, monetary evaluation, social expectations, etc. And on the other hand, scientific studies deal with green space, but also on part of them, like urban forest, street trees, green roof, and a broad range of nature-based solutions whose definition is the theme of research by itself. So the knowledge about the roles and the function of green space, and part of them, is more and more documented, which is a good thing for us, I think. So with this background information, the question I will try to answer today is, what is green heritage? What are we talking about? Property, ideas, inheritance, or all together? Second is, what are green space amenities and how strong is the proof? The strength of the results of scientific studies must be discussed. In fact, it's the nature of science. The results are not just black or white, and they may not be applied to another context than the one used for the research. So you have to take it as an invitation to be critical, even with science. Third is about the method to evaluate green space amenities and what can be done by a manager. In the last part of the presentation, we will shortly talk about other cultural values and opportunities to take care of green heritage together. Now, about green heritage. So yes, green heritage has more and more importance, socially, culturally, economically, environmentally. But in the past, green space was designed as a symbol of power for wealthy and rich people. In the history of the French aristocracy, for example, the leisure castles were designed with parks and gardens as a sign of their owners' wealth and prosperity. So you may or you may not know that the castle of Versailles is also called the castle of jealousy. In fact, the King Louis XIV was jealous of the castle of Vaux-le-Vicomte. This is the one you can see on the picture. It looks like the domain of Versailles, because the king demanded to the architect and the landscaper of Vaux-le-Vicomte to replicate the gardens of Vaux-le-Vicomte for Versailles. Nowadays, it has become obvious that parks and green space are medium to increase quality of life in urban areas, but also for their appeal. Here is a picture of the quay of the river Rhone in Lyon, in France. It was completely redesigned a few years ago as a green space to encourage pedestrian traffic only. In this case, the urban planning can be considered as a heritage for city dwellers and even for the next generation. So this global evolution takes place in the context of climatic changes and other environmental issues that affect all of us, even if some people are not concerned about it today. The place of nature in urban areas has become one of the most important issues for the future of the planet. Over the last few decades, a new vision has spread, and a famous French landscape designer called Gilles Clément summarized the situation by saying, "The earth is a small garden." So it's a vision of a society neither outside of nature nor dominating, but acting in favor of nature to which we belong and taking care of the function of ecosystem locally and globally. So parks and green space offer a broad range of amenities. I will describe them in the next part. But the fact is that green space has three main features. First, it's mainly available for us. For everybody, sorry. It has a high value in heritage in terms of material and spirituality, but it has no market value, which can be an issue to consider in a society dominated by economy. So when it comes to city investments, parks are not as important as highway, convention centers or office blocks. They don't have the same consideration. So for green space manager, it gives them the responsibility to argue on the benefits of nature in city in order to have enough budget to create new green space and to maintain the existing ones. So for those of you who are manager, I think it certainly makes sense every day. Now I would like to talk about the amenities of nature and green space in cities. Over the last few years, Plant and City carried out a study on the scientific research on benefits of green space. This study was based on an international literature review of more than 300 scientific publications. We produced this document that summarizes findings on the benefits of green space, and I encourage you to read it so you can download an English version directly from our website. From this large-scale review, we identified 9 groups of key benefits. So we presented them under the 3 pillars of sustainable development. For people, the benefits deal with human health and well-being, social cohesion. For natural balance, the benefits are the preservation of biodiversity, climate regulation, air and water quality, soil protection. For the economy, it deals with the optimization of the built-up environment, with tourism and the regional appeal. There is also the use of plant products, like in urban agriculture projects, but I will not talk about this today. By studying each of these benefits, we have realized that evaluation can be highly problematic. I would like to focus a little bit on that. So the determining factors are many and complex. First, social contexts vary considerably from one city to another. And second, the studies are not all based on the same methodologies. This can explain that some results are more robust than others, or some facts better documented than other ones. As a consequence, identifying the specific contribution of green space to a given benefit can be very difficult. The third column of the table presented here classifies the benefits according to the measurability and the strength of the existing evidence. This presentation is based on the work of IFPRA in June 2012 by the Professor Conin and Dick. Strong evidence indicates benefits that have been covered by many studies and measured accurately in situ to assess the impact of vegetation and green space. On the other hand, weak evidence indicates benefits for which few studies exist, and the results come from modeling or qualitative surveys. As you can see here, and it's important, the strongest evidence has been gathered for health and well-being of city dwellers and for biodiversity preservation. So please keep it in mind for the next presentation of benefits. Now we're going to go through the benefits of urban vegetation to people. Increased physical activity and a reduction in obesity levels are the two benefits strongly evidenced associated with a nearby park or green space. Green space not only provides a location for the activity, but it can also create motivation, especially if the quality of the site is well perceived by users. People are naturally much more likely to use a green space if it is well maintained and if it is well connected to the rest of the city. A recent study realized by the University of Washington reported the benefits of even small parks, small gardens, especially if they are well connected or connected together in a coherent network in the city. There are other benefits on human health. You may have heard about longevity, alleviation of attention deficit disorders, reduction of stress. However, they still require some additional research to be really proven. About social cohesion, green space strengthens social cohesion by providing a place where people can meet and do activity together. It seems obvious that public green space creates different opportunities for contact between people from diverse social conditions. And all this interaction may bring a positive community spirit. But on the other hand, if the green space is overused, it may generate the opposite effect, and a new demand for green space will happen, obviously. About air quality. It's a major concern in urban areas in the interest of both public health and the environment. A high numbers of pollutants are involved. We talk about fine particles. We also talk about carbon sequestration, which is a big issue in the context of climate change. So many research demonstrated the role of vegetation to filter airborne particles and to absorb pollutants. For example, a Chinese study measured quantities of fine particles, and especially two pollutants, sulfur dioxide and nitrogen dioxide, in 6 parks in Shanghai. The results showed that vegetation, trees in particular, absorbs all these particles and pollutants. By means of modeling, the researchers were able to estimate the global particle capture rate at 9% and the absorption rates for sulfur dioxide and nitrogen dioxide at 5 and 3% respectively. At these rates, it may have impacts on people have, positive impacts. However, vegetation also produces ozone, which is a damaging pollutant for human health. It happens particularly in summer, but the effects remain lower than for the particles from traffic and industries. But I think it's important not to mention only the positive effects. Vegetation can generate negative effects as well, like pollens that are a source of allergens. Now we're going to go through the benefits of green space on thermal comforts. Several studies have demonstrated the key role played by vegetation in regulating the heat island effect in cities. Heat island effect, for those of you who don't know, is the increase of temperature with urban density. So parks have been shown to be cooler than areas around them. The effects are higher at night than during the day, which is interesting during heat waves, when night temperatures are very high. And the intensity and the impact of these phenomena are related to the size of the park and the vegetation composition, of course. In some cases, it's really possible to talk about cool island effect to describe the effect of a park on its surrounding environment. About energy consumption, it is known that the presence of trees around the building helps reducing the speed and the penetrative power of the wind. A study at Chicago showed that street trees help to save 2 to 7% of the energy required for air conditioning by improving the energy efficiency level of the building, of the house. Other planting features as green roof or green walls also impact microclimate and thermal insulation of the built-up environment. The intensity of this effect depends on the type of the vegetation and the depth of the substrate. There are plenty studies on that. Now I'd like to talk about biodiversity. In recent years, biodiversity in urban areas has become a major subject of concern, both for its conservation and its management. A broad planning approach that integrates a series of even small green space into corridors is a great opportunity for plants and animal biodiversity. In some cases, urban parks can be considered as green islands for many species, and they offer habitats for many of them. The special features of a green space and the way it is managed can influence positively or negatively the diversity of species and habitat. If I just had one example to give about the impact of the maintenance, I would focus on the use of pesticide in green space. It is one of the major causes of loss of biodiversity. But what is interesting is that the stop of pesticide use helps very quickly to recover the function of ecosystem and its biodiversity. So to encourage, it's never too late to stop pesticides in public space. And of course, there are many other arguments on public health as well. About water drainage and soil protection. Urban vegetation helps to protect against environmental risks, such as floods or soil erosion, and it's because green space, even small, can play a role in water cycle. It allows temporary retention, slower runoff, and rainwater infiltration. So it's possible to consider green space as a solution for rainwater management. Higher infiltration levels also help to replenish underground aquifers that improve water quality in general. A case study in Beijing, in China, in 2012, showed that nearly 2,500 cubic meters of runoff water can be infiltrating for each hectare of vegetation. In addition, the total volume of rainwater stored by green space is equivalent to the city's annual requirement for parks and gardens irrigation. So there are clever things to do in order not to use the tap water for green space irrigation. And of course, it depends on the climate and the region of the world where you are. About soil protection, plant covers protect the soil from the erosion and sinking of the ground, that often happen after a water storm. And the root system creates protective structures in the soil and had further layer of protection against erosion. Now about optimizing the built-up environment. Many studies showed that popular green space increased the value of nearby properties. Even a view on an attractive landscape or a body of water also add value to properties. This effect has also been observed with urban forests and concern both houses and apartments. However, the extent of this phenomenon vary widely from one city to another, and even from one park to another. The research demonstrated that there are higher impacts on property values with medium-sized parks. An economic study in Japan showed by modeling that in an area with no park, creating a 5,000 square meter park will increase nearby studio rent by $13. It means that people are willing to pay 13 more US dollar per month for having this new green space in their surrounding. It's a lot. It's a lot if we consider all the apartments around that kind of park. About regional appeal. There are few studies on the subject on tourism and green space, but recently the French organization on tourism called Atout France carried out a study on the role of parks on tourism. So excepted for some cases, the conclusion is that public parks and green space don't determine the choice of a touristic destination. but they increase the duration of the stay, especially with city breaks, and they can give a strong identity of the city. So for example, you won't go to New York especially to visit the Highland Park, but you may stay longer to include it in your visits. Besides, you may have better memories of your stay thanks to the quality of green space. So we can also imagine that the quality of urban environment sends residents and visitors a strong message that can contribute to the region's social and economic development. The third part of the webinar is about the ways to estimate amenities. The economists describe 3 different methods to build a monetary evaluation of services from green space and nature and city. The first is the contingent evaluation that considers and estimates the extra money that people are willing to pay for the use of a park or other green space. It's not a method often used because the question may be unbiased. Actually, the way questions are asked to people may induce the response of them on the price they want to give to a green space. So the example I gave about the study in Japan needs to be considered cautiously. Another method is the avoided cost, when we try to estimate the savings in healthcare costs directly or indirectly due to green space. The last one is the hedonic pricing methods. It allows to estimate the value of green space through an estimation of the value of nearby properties. And this is one of the most frequently used recently in studies in France. However, each of these methods has limits and doesn't have a broad approach, as they don't look at the same thing, in fact. That's why I want to focus now on a study for the city of Philadelphia that has been carried out by the organization, the Trust for Public Land, in 2008. So with different methods, this very trustworthy study showed the value of green space amenities for city. Here is an extract. Philadelphia's park provides the city and its residents high value. That's $23 million in revenue, in city revenue. That's $16 million in city council cost savings. And that's more than $700 million generated in wealth for residents. And at the end, 1.1 million in cost savings for citizens. The total is about 100 times the amount that city spends on parks each year. So beyond these figures, one of the most important results of this study is that the total of the incomes and savings due to the parks and recreation system is much higher than the cost for the maintenance and the creation of green space. But this impressive study must not hide that city park economy is a new science that requires a lot of data on parks lands, facilities, spending and use, properties effects, and it's not affordable for all. It's not easy as well. So for a daily life use, we propose this diagnostic tool to assess the benefits of green space by considering the determinants of their quality. The goal of this tool is to help stakeholders in a project to think about how to improve and develop green space, taking into consideration 5 features. The first is the quantity of green space, but not only. There is also the accessibility of them, the ability of nature-based solutions to contribute to the environment, the natural balance, and the diversity of function and use of green space. This tool can be used on different scales, a small plot, a new park, or all the green infrastructure of a city. You can find it on the publication of Plant and City about benefits of green space, the one I presented at the beginning of the webinar. So in the last part of this webinar, I would like to talk a little bit about cultural values of green heritage. Because parks and green space are much more than amenities to exploit, I think it would not be correct, according to me, to end by economic questions. So in this short part, we will see why green heritage must be considered as common good and how to cultivate it together. First, cultural values deal with knowledge. Gardens are unique places in city to help people reconnected to their environment, to their natural environment, with the support of botanical knowledge. Let me give you an example as a demonstration. We did a study a few years ago that put in evidence the link between botanical knowledge and the weed's acceptance. So it's funny to say, but if people can name the plant, they will no longer consider it as a weed. The results are very impressive, and in every part of France and in every category, professional categories, socio-professional categories. So it can be a solution to make people accept the changing of their environment by the knowledge, a few knowledge on plants. There are also many studies on the richness and the specificity of biodiversity in urban places. And these pictures were taken during a meeting on urban pastoralism and the way that this new practice in France can enhance biodiversity. It's just an example of action we carry out to change people's opinion on wilderness in the city. But cultural values can also deal with wonder and delight. So just an example, here is a picture of a topiary chicken in the botanical garden of Nantes in France. This chicken is the main character of a famous cartoonist called Claude Ponty. With the complicity of the manager, the chicken moves each year from one part to another part of the garden. It's very successful, and it attracts many people when the artistic season starts again. So all these immaterial value have been approved by the Council of Europe in the European Landscape Convention in 2000. This convention states that all the landscapes, from remarkable sites like the Alhambra's garden in Spain, in the left, in Spain, to daily life gardens, such as squares, are extremely useful for social matters. But unfortunately, the social inequities on access to public green space still go on. In France, some local governments make effort to change the situation. So here is a picture as an example of a new green space designed in a district where people were underprivileged. It's not just a garden between the buildings. It's a change because it has been proven that the proximity of green space at less than 300 meters of a block is a strong criteria of health and well-being for inhabitants. But you must not consider that creation of new green space is the only thing to do. In fact, we can also adopt better practices in favor to public health and biodiversity, like with the stop of pesticide. And by the way, we pointed out that many cities in France that started new policy to reduce or to stop pesticide in public place, made great changes in their environment, with more thinking about the landscape and the use, more thinking about enhancing biodiversity, more thinking about urban planning. So it has generated many positive changes for people and their built-up environment. But managers can also encourage citizens to recover relationship with plants and nature, and even with food. The movement Incredible Edibles is a famous example, but we have also observed citizens' action for flowering streets, planting trees in public place to celebrate birth, for sharing flowers and seeds, etc. So to conclude, we have observed that green heritage is no longer a public investment, but it has started to become a common good to city dwellers, sharing the responsibility with city council services. And I think we have many reasons to be optimistic because there are many examples that illustrate deep changes in our relation to nature and city. So to finish, I think it was a short presentation, in fact. Here is a selection of resources if you are interested to go further on the topic. So the first is the publication by the Trust for Public Land. How much values does the city of Philadelphia receive from its park and recreation system? It's a very interesting publication. The second one deals with environmental correlates of physical activity, a review of evidence about park and recreation. The third one is by the Professor Connie Nundick on benefits of urban parks, a systematic review. The next one is the presentation, the publication I presented previously, the benefits of urban vegetation with the study of scientific research and method of analysis. And the last one is an example of publication on carbon storage and sequestration by trees. Of course, there are many other publications on this field. Well, I hope you learned things during this webinar, and I hope that my English was okay. So if you have any question, I think it's the right time to share it, and I will try to answer the best that I can.
Thank you, Caroline. Thank you for sharing with us today. If anyone has questions, we have plenty of time. You can enter your question in the chat box or use the microphone. Yeah, thank you. That was a great presentation.
Okay, thank you.
And your English is great. Perfect.
Okay, thank you.
You could also let us know where you're coming from today. It's really pretty fun. We have people from South Africa on the line, and I think maybe from New Zealand and the US. You could share with us. That would be great as well. Thank you. AMG, I see your comment. Where are you coming from today? Caroline, I was wondering if France has an urban forestry program or any sort of management in that regard. I know in the US we've had some initiatives in cities, like you mentioned Chicago, and in New York we've had these million tree programs, and I'm wondering if France has anything like that.
Okay, I understand. Well, it's a question of definition. Urban forest is not a definition for France. I mean, we talk about street trees and little woods, and there are big woods in some cities, but we don't talk about urban forest as the whole component of trees in cities. But there are many cities like Paris and Nantes and other places where that take into consideration the roles of trees by planting and by maintaining the existing small urban forests. So there is an issue as well because it's well known today that we can also act on this kind of green space for carbon sequestration.
Are there any citizen groups or organizations leading initiatives like that, or trying to, or is it mostly government?
You mean in France?
In France, yeah.
Other organization like can you repeat, please?
For example, here in the U.S. we have like nonprofit organizations that have formed, that have started initiatives for green spaces, and I'm wondering if in France is
Yes. Yes, actually, there are other. Well, we have research centers on agronomy, and they of course they take care of forest and urban forest research issues, but there are also other structures involved in the conservation of this kind of heritage in natural areas. So there are links between all this. In this environment, in that kind of professional ecosystem.
Okay. Thank you. Does anyone else have a question? I have a couple other questions, if you don't mind.
You're welcome.
So I was wondering, I know I remember seeing when I was in France the stars for, I think it had to do with gardens. Each city could receive a certain number of stars.
Of stars, you mean as a to celebrate? Are
It
you
was
sure
like,
that
uh,
it's flowers? In fact,
yes, that's what it was.
the sign at the entrance of a city.
Yes.
Okay, yes, you're right. Actually, there are many. We call that labels. It's or, I don't know if it's the right word in English, but there are many AdWords for cities. Like for if a city is very well flowered, it will receive a sign with different different flowers. So it's something very famous in France, and it's called cities and village flowered. Flowering cities and villages, but we have also AdWords for if a site, a specific site that can be a small garden, a square, or even a cemetery, if it is very well maintained as an ecological point of view, it will have another AdWord that is called Eco Jardin, like Eco Garden, and we have been involved in the creation of this AdWord as well. And there are other, but well, France is very is full of that kind of signs. In fact,
That's great. Thank you. Are there any that are more inclusive? I know the flower one is a big one. Are there any that are more inclusive of all of the benefits?
can you? I haven't heard very much.
Is there any sort of award that isn't specific to flowers or that is more inclusive of everything that you've talked about, all the benefits? Is there?
Well, I think it just the two kind of awards are dealing with flowers, with horticultural things, or the quality of green space regarding to ecological functions. But it's related to sustainable development, and there are no other awards that would say well it's a place where you can breathe very nice or good quality for your health, for example. So it does not cover everything.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Do you have AdWords in the US? Like
I
that?
know that we do for trees,
Okay.
and I think maybe flowers are included as well. I don't know. Maybe Matthew, do you know of any other awards that we do?
Is it a question?
Yeah, I was asking Matthew if he's listening. Maybe he knows of any other awards we might have. I know we have some for trees in the urban forestry program.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay.
How about, you mentioned pesticide use, and I was wondering if there are any laws being passed in France to minimize the amount of pesticides used, or if you know of any countries or cities that are more progressive in this, not using as much pesticides.
Can you repeat it, please?
Yeah, you mentioned pesticide use and how we should minimize the amount of pesticides we use in our urban landscapes, and I was wondering if France has any laws.
Yes, we have. Actually, we have one hard regulation for the ban of pesticide is one of the last laws on public open space, and since January, last January, it's now forbidden to use pesticide in public open space. Well, actually, there are exceptions. You can you can still spray pesticide in cemeteries or on roads if it's a case of security, safety. But on the other place, it's completely forbidden now.
Are any alternatives being used?
Yes, there are many alternatives with thermic alternative and with gas and hot water. But the main alternative is mechanical techniques. So they can be manual, or they can be with motor. I mean, big machine to clean the road. But I think that an important issue is not to consider the only the issue in a technical point of view. It's also an issue on weeds acceptance by people, by city dwellers, and another kind of issue is how to create garden that won't be in which the weeds can be present without being a problem. So there are things to do on that, and some cities are very well prepared for that, and with illustration that it works. It can work.
Okay. Thank you. Does anyone else have questions? Looks like a couple of people have signed up, so if no one else has questions, I think we can go ahead and end the webinar. Just as a reminder, continuing education units are available on provalencelearning.com for a small fee and an assessment that we put together relating to the presentation. And those credits also count toward certification with World Parks Academy. So check that out if you haven't, and thank you for joining us today. Thanks again, Caroline.
Bye. Great. Thank you.